Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to dive into the world of, let's go into the workplace. And we're going to talk about the procedures that take place behind the scenes when you fill out that resume and it goes through all these different scenarios before you get offered the job. It has to be analyzed. Today on the show, we have a young lady who is well known in the HR department, who is coming on today to explain some of the things that go on behind the scenes that we don't see, and some lessons that you need to know about to help amplify your resumes and, more importantly, your opportunity in corporate America. Like to welcome to the show the one, the only lady herself in charge of HR, Mrs. HR. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. It's a pleasure to be here.
Your resume and your qualifications are truly mind-blowing. Before we get into that, tell the viewers a little bit about you first before we get into your truly magnificent resume.
Well, first and foremost, I am a Jersey girl, born and raised in East Orange, New Jersey. And I started my career in human resources in entertainment. And I pretty much just started my own business, Thela Thatch Consulting. So I help small businesses and entrepreneurs with their HR questions, HR support, human resources support. I also do benefits and equity work.
When you say HR, like somebody like me, that name's been around for quite some time. And when you're going in and you're going through the protocol for a job, you always hear the word HR. But exactly what is an HR person, and what are the qualifications to even have that title?
So human resources involves all of the functions from hire to fire. I like to say it involves the employment life cycle. So whether you know what human resources is or not, you are typically dealing with the HR person, especially in large organizations with more than 100 employees. You need that person like myself that manages the process from recruiting. So a lot of the recruiting departments fall under human resources, from sourcing, finding out where to get employees from, all the way to when you're onboarded. We call it onboarding, when you're put into the organization. So HR people like myself, that's what we do. We do everything from hire to employee relations when you have an issue at the organization, investigations, harassment, discrimination, all of those things are covered under human resources.
So you mentioned a lot of hats.
Yes.
That has to be worn when you're basically when you're basically
and payroll.
And what was the other one?
Payroll, the big one.
Okay.
Often payroll, making sure you get paid, that part.
That's a lot of responsibilities. That's a lot of responsibility. How do you, first of all, when somebody's giving you their resume, what are some of the things that will highlight a candidate versus things that would deter you from even allowing them to go to the second phase of the hiring process?
Well, one of the first things that we look at, even though, most HR people may not tell you this, is the method that the resume was received. So whether it's a referral, a referral from the CEO is a lot different from a referral from somebody's cousin, right? And so a lot of times where that resume is coming from takes precedent. So it really is important if you can get your resume through someone who knows someone, I typically would recommend that. You know, a lot of times it truly is about who you know. So a lot of HR people wouldn't tell you that. So let me tell you, the HR answer is we also look at the job description and how your qualifications and skills match that job description. So if we're looking for someone who can write 500 words per hour, then on your resume, you must have something that says something like, I write or have written 500 words per hour for those companies that you work for. So basically, recruiters and HR people, we're looking for keywords. If we're looking for someone with a master's degree, you want that on your resume. So when we do a control find or control search, you can see the words master's degree. You can see the certification. So, you know, we get a lot of resumes. So honestly, the priority for most HR people is trying to figure out, is it a referral? Is this coming from my boss? Is this coming from the CEO? Is this coming from a reputable person in the organization? Because HR people, recruiting people, we want to pick the right candidate, and we don't know that candidate. So if you know that candidate and we trust you, we're going to put that resume at the top. And then the person, now you got to have the qualifications. Now you have to have the ability to have a concise, clear resume, to speak and have a really good presentation when you're interviewing. So that to me is number two. Number one is getting in the door using your relationships.
You mentioned as part of HR, do you conduct or the actual interviewing process?
Definitely. Yeah.
What are
so HR?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying HR may or may not always be in the interview, but typically we do the pre-screening. We do the interviews before they meet with the final decision maker. So the final decision maker is typically the hiring manager. So we call that person the hiring manager. And the hiring manager could be literally the cook at Burger King. They may not be, they may not have the title manager, but if they're the decision maker, we call them the hiring manager or decision maker, because that's going to be the person managing the process and managing and making the final decision. So we always want to know, okay, who's making the final decision?
What is the advantages of an individual doing their resume, presenting it across your desk versus an individual that goes through a headhunter or headhunter organization and presenting their product, the client's resume and qualifications onto your desk? Does that add a little bit more value to you over looking at them over the other person versus who you know?
Well, not really. I would say a headhunter, and I have served as a headhunter hiring for executive roles. So typically a headhunter would be someone that the organization pays and hires to look for more director level or executive level roles. And so because you're paying that headhunter, sometimes you're paying them like thousands of dollars a month to find this person. Yeah, you're going to look at the applicants that they send and assume that they're going to be qualified. However, a headhunter could be hired, and then you could recommend your colleague or a friend of yours, and that person is more qualified. And so the headhunter is no longer needed. So it's all about relationships. And I really want to drill that home to your audience, because a lot of times, especially women and people of color, and it's a known research fact that women won't apply for jobs if they feel they don't have every single thing in their resume. And it's really not about every dot being, checked, every T being crossed.
What do you mean when you say that every single thing in there, things that that push the female away? What are some of those things that pushes the female or makes her not want to apply?
Right. Well, there's been research done that women won't apply for jobs if they feel that their resume doesn't match the criteria. So, for example, if I'm a marketing coordinator and there's a vice president of marketing position open, I might tell myself as a woman, well, I don't have the title vice president of marketing, so I'm not going to apply because my title is marketing coordinator. Where we've seen males typically will apply for all of the jobs, global VP, VP of marketing, with a title of marketing coordinator, because it has to go, everything I'm talking about in terms of recruiting and sourcing, it all is about confidence. It's all about believing that you're competent and using those soft skills, using those relationships. All of those things also are important, not just the job title. So females, a lot of times women, including myself in the past, struggling with imposter syndrome, struggling with, I don't have the right title. I haven't, my title's coordinator, so I could never be a vice president. I have to go through this chain. A lot of times men don't think that way. They'll apply for a job with like 2 months of experience and expect to be promoted to vice president. So we've seen that in our society, and that's how it shows up in the workplace, where typically women will wait until they feel they're ready, when they're more than ready, but they're waiting for someone to give them permission to be ready. So we've seen a lot of this movement of, stop asking for permission, you're ready, use your soft skills, things like that.
Have there ever been moments in your career that you've chosen an applicant based on life work experience versus someone that may have had a master's or certain educational with their resume? Has that ever came across?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And honestly, as you know, as meeting with me a few months ago, just on a casual basis, I'm all about equity. And the reality is, when you're looking at different resumes, there are certain people who have lived experience. That lived experience may not translate as a Yale or Harvard degree, right? You look at someone, and this is what I teach large corporations. I've worked for organizations like Live Nation, Cablevision, UPS. I've been in corporations, most recently Paychex. And part of the work that I did around equity there was making sure the recruiting system that was set up did not alienate people who did not have college degrees or master's degrees, and that we were able to talk about other experiences. So, for example, I worked for the Los Angeles County working with the unhoused initiatives. And so at one point, they were hiring from the county people who didn't really understand the homeless community, people who had never seen the homeless community. And so we made a concerted, strong effort to make sure that people who worked with the community, the unhoused community, had lived experience, whether it was out of, coming in and out of incarceration, coming in and out of addiction. We don't want to rule people out who understand that community. And I will tell you, there's laws that protect people coming out of addiction, coming out of, homelessness or incarceration, called the Fair Chance Act. So there's Fair Chance Act laws that were created by Obama's administration and reinforced in the Obama administration. So that way we can look at people with lived experience. It's super, super important. And I'm so glad you asked that question, because that's kind of the core of the work that I do, is helping organizations understand that we need to think outside of the box when you're thinking of what we call diverse hiring. Diverse hiring goes deeper than the color of people's skin and their gender. It's about experience too.
And I think that's good that you brought that up. And that's one thing that we do try to provide here on this platform is educational, empowermental subjects and topics, because a lot of people who have addiction, and it's pretty widespread now, even emotional problems, that there is resources out there. I've had friends that I've met that have been incarcerated, and the first thing they say is, who's going to hire me? And it never dawned on me, is there laws to allow them to get jobs? But this is the key question with this. This is the key question. There may be laws set up for this, for not to discriminate against addictions and not to discriminate against incarcerations, and all these things are set in place. But the thing that I'm going to ask you as an HR person, how likely are you going to enforce that? And more importantly, how many times have this been overlooked because company might say, okay, that's good, but we're not going to utilize it?
Right. It's very likely at this stage in the game. Again, especially in California where I'm sitting, I have had to remind managers that it's the law. Again, the Fair Chance Hiring Act, especially if they're working for governmental agencies, they have to look at applicants who may have had a criminal history or a drug history, right? Because who's to say they're on drugs now? We don't know. So one of the things that are put in place is you cannot make an offer based on a background check. You only can ask someone if they've had a history of a criminal history or a history of drugs or addiction after you make the job offer. That is crucial because by law, and this is across many, many states, by law, you cannot ask those questions. So it's forcing the employer to judge the candidate based on their skills, knowledge, and abilities, what we call KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And it forces you to say, oh, I wanted to hire you. Now I'm going to ask you, do you have a background? Now I'm going to ask if you have a criminal record. And then you have to measure that on a case-by-case basis to see if that person is eligible for the job. So for example, if I'm hiring a bank teller and this person robbed a bank 5 years ago, most likely, no, we do not want to hire the person who robbed the bank as a bank teller. Mm-hmm. But if I'm hiring a janitor and this person, was arrested for multiple parking tickets, we want to look at that case by case, right? Because you have to look at the situation. And another error that people make all the time, and I used to do this early in my career, is trying not to hire people who have been arrested. So someone may say, oh yeah, I've been arrested, but does that mean they've been convicted? And so you got to be really, really clear on, I could be arrested because my neighbor filed false charges against me because I, moved her garbage. That doesn't mean I'm a criminal. And again, if you look at Black and brown people and the history of, criminal convictions and being falsely blamed for things, we need to dig a little deeper when we're hiring people to ask those questions and not just assume someone was guilty just because they were convicted or arrested, because there's always a story and they may have proof that they were innocent.
You brought up something about the hiring process, and then you ask that person, have you ever been blah, blah, blah? But right. Most applications have that question on the thing. So wouldn't you already known this ahead of time prior to you bringing them in because it's on the application? Have you ever been convicted of a felony?
I'm so excited. This is where the nerdy public policy person comes out, because
ahead.
That was the work that I did in California, is removing that from the application. So if there's a state that has a law, fair chance hiring laws, that should not be on the application. And what you find is that a lot of companies are, just grandfathering these applications. They're copy and pasting it from some old company they work for. And so that's where I come into play as a human resources person, to look at your applications and make sure they don't have things that questions like that do you have, because there is absolutely no reason for asking that on the application. That comes during the background check process part, once you have been made a job offer. So I love that. But the only reason I have power to do that is because it's a policy, it's a law. And I can reinforce that law and let hiring managers and owners know, remove that from the application. We should not be asking that question.
Man, you are like literally providing some really good information. I hope that the listeners pay close attention to that. So what's the responsibility of the corporations, McDonald's or whoever, Burger King, not to say that they're not following these practices, but shouldn't they be accountable to know that these questions are unlawful and that they should not be on the application for the individual? Or is there a penalty involved? Or let's put it a different way: if you don't know, you don't know.
Well, organizations, it's just like running the stop sign and telling the police officer that I didn't know that I had to stop at a stop sign.
Mm-hmm.
It's still against the law. You don't get a pass for not knowing the law. And
Right.
the same with organizations. They do not get a pass for not knowing the law. So they need human resources people and attorneys who understand employment law. Now, I would like to believe that in this day and age, you are not going to find questions around criminal history on applications from companies like Burger King. I mean, if it is rare because companies have, especially under the Obama administration, like I said, it was a high effort. You know, Obama was making sure that fair chance hiring was, in effect. He actually had a website, Fair Chance Hiring, where employers like Burger King, McDonald's committed to the administration during the time to say, I'm going to raise my hand. I am a fair chance, second chance employer. And so that during that wave of policy and movement, a lot of employers were educated that should not be on an application. And as you know, not to get political, we had a new administration come in. There wasn't that much emphasis on that because, again, who does it affect? Brown and Black people who may be weeded out through the process. So please, 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 I challenge you and everybody, if you find an application that's asking for criminal history or
What should
asking
they do if
anything
they
like
find it, if they run into that? Like, what if somebody runs? I'm glad you brought that up. If you run into somebody like that, for viewers that are listening, and you went to go fill out an application and that was on there, what should that person do, knowing that should not have been on that application, and it probably jeopardized their opportunities with getting a job?
Yes, they should just leave it blank.
Okay.
They should just leave it blank and because what happens is, for the employer, just to warn the employer, the applicant has rights too. The applicant has rights under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act to be protected from discrimination. And so that applicant could say, oh, well, they discriminated against me due to my socioeconomic status, because of my race. They were asking me questions about my background, seeing if I had a criminal history. They should not ask that until they make a job offer. So to be safe, they shouldn't answer. And then if the hiring manager or the HR person say, hey, you left that blank, say, well, I thought you were a fair chance hiring employer. I just wanted to support fair chance hiring. And so I always leave it blank. I don't answer questions like that. So they shouldn't be asking you if you have a criminal background until you are further into the hiring process after they make you a job offer. So, it's just like people asking you any other question, like you're in an interview and they're asking you, are you married? Or what race are you?
Okay.
Or what religion are you? Like, those questions should not come up in an interview. That's against the law.
We just had on the show an attorney from California, Hispanic, and we also talked about the employment law type topic popped up.
Mm-hmm.
Is there advantages with going with a company that has an HR department where somebody is actually reviewing and analyzing versus going to, let's say, a company who doesn't, and then the individuals may become exploited with that company and some of these companies may have an HR department and may turn a blind eye to bringing in a workforce that they know can cause problems, even if it's at the risk of the employees themselves.
Right. So on a personal note, one thing that I share, excuse me, one thing that I share with HR people is that we have to have professional courage because we have to have the courage to reinforce the things that we're talking about. So, in a recent study done by this organization, it showed that 86% of employees do not trust HR. HR is typically one of the most hated people people in departments in an organization. I
Wow.
know that. That's why I came up with this name. When people would see me in the hallway, they would say, "Oh, here comes Mrs. HR." That's where I got my name from, because people would see me and run and say, "Uh oh, here comes Mrs. HR. Uh oh, here she comes." And so I took that name and made it into a positive thing. So
Why is
HR,
it such a hated? And you're probably right, because when I hear HR, I be like, oh my God, I mean,
yes.
why is there such a myth? Because it because of nepotism that they think is going on behind the scenes.
No, not really. It's because they believe that HR is positioned to support and protect the organization. It really is. And so HR people are typically working behind doors. They're doing secret, what looks like secret things. And typically, a lot of organizations don't really lean on HR until they want to terminate people or until they want to fire people. They don't look at all of the different, some organizations, not all, but they're not really focused on the strategies that we bring to the table, like diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, recruiting strategies. We do a lot of strategic things in the background. Also, we don't always get credit for that because the work we do in the background is then given to a CEO or an owner, and then I've written scripts for
What
CEOs,
do you
right?
mean secret stuff? Give me an example of some secret things behind the scene that
A lot
you
of
do.
secret things, like when there's layoffs, we're going through each person and determining who would be the best position, who should we let go. So we might look at you and be like, well, Andre's, he's a black male, he's over 40. There's a risk there. However,
Mhm.
his performance is poor. He has poor performance and he's a risk because he made a comment. Like we go through each and every one of your attributes to determine if you're the right person to stay or if you're the right person.
Hold that, hold
We
that,
do
hold
it
that, hold that thought for a minute. I'm gonna ask you a question. This happened to a
for.
friend of mine. So hold this thought.
Okay.
How important is let me rephrase this. How much of your social media now, because we live in that digital blueprint, do you guys go back to investigate that can handicap you into getting the job? But I'm pretty sure you can't tell that individual you didn't get the job because your social media has some things that may affect the job.
Well, yes, we can. You can ask someone anything at the right time in the right way. But I will say when I was working for different organizations and we're looking at managers and people in leadership roles, your social media has a really strong part of the process. So a lot of times now we're looking at LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn page or if your LinkedIn page is kind of weird, that comes into play immediately. Then I promise you the hiring manager is going to take a minute and look at your Facebook, Instagram, all of that. All of your social media will come into play. So there was a situation, we were looking for a head of something, a director at one organization, and this woman was a bodybuilder, and her very first picture was her in a tight, bikini, flexing, showing off her body. And I had all of the different hiring managers buzzing around. I came in the morning like, oh, we found she's on social media in a bikini. And you know what I said? I said, and what does that have to do with the role she's going to be in? And it looks like she's a bodybuilder. That's what they do. They wear bikinis.
Right,
So
right.
I had to dismantle that. I had to check them on their biases. I had to check them, right? And that's why I said HR people have to have professional courage and trust. The leaders have to trust me enough to say no. Like, no, we're not going there. Okay. So are you going to tell her she didn't get the job because you didn't like her bikini? that you shouldn't have been looking at. And the way legal has always guided me when I've dealt with situations like this
Mhm.
is the question is the page public or private? So if it's a public persona and you have someone that you're trying to hire that's going to be in a public role and it doesn't fit that public
Mhm.
persona, then yeah, you can say that. It's like your public persona doesn't fit the public persona that we want for our organization. But if it's a private page, that's really none of your business because you shouldn't be on that.
Does that bring a red flag in if I have pages that are private?
No,
Does that bring a red flag? Like why is
absolutely. No, why should that? I mean, my goodness, can we hold on to some of the Constitution? No, you can have privacy laws, this okay. And honestly, I respect someone who has a level of privacy where the truth is some people may not
Mhm.
respect your so it's all kind of, as you can hear us as we're talking, is very rooted in bias and personal opinion. And so the goal is, as an HR person, is for me to get all of that out of there and to challenge your biases, challenge your stereotypes, your personal opinions, because those are the type of things that stop people from gaining and getting employment. You and all of your stuff like
Mhm.
that. Not everybody thinks like me. Not everybody thinks like you. Not everybody has a problem with somebody in a bikini. Not
Right.
everybody thinks like I've had someone say, oh, we don't want to hire this gentleman. I talk about this in my book, The Diversity Dilemma. They literally said they didn't want to hire the person because their name sound too Native American, right? They were like, nobody's going to respect this person because they can't, his name is funny.
How do
It's
you,
like,
how, how
oh,
how must that feel for you to be in a leadership type role to make decisions on bringing in new development for companies, but then to sit at a board of directors meeting, so to speak, and knowing that these closed-minded individuals are simply just that, closed-minded individual. But more importantly, I'm a little bit upset because I can't believe that anybody who has that role like what you have could sit there and basically go with the system knowing that, let's just use a number, 8 people are really biased and not open-minded with the way that they view people.
right, right. Well, I go back and forth with being frustrated and being determined.
Mhm.
So I have moments where I'm very frustrated. I know the fight that we're in, and it's really a social justice, social awareness fight, even in the workplace. Because if you think about it, there's over like 71 billion people in the workplace. And that makes up our society. Our society is the workplace, right? So you get all types of people coming in. You literally have serial killers in the workplace, right? You have murderers in the work. You have all types of people that make up this society, and they're working with you. So I have to remember that as a leader, as an HR leader, I'm influencing our community through the workplace. I'm influencing society. So I gotta hold tight and be patient and listen. And so when I hear people making comments like that, I see it as an opportunity to change their mind, to influence them, and to hold them accountable. So yes, it's very frustrating, it's very exhausting, but then I don't make it about me. And then I try to remember that I've had these same type of biases and kind of statements based in ignorance myself. I've said things and made judgments about people myself. And so I have to remember that, none of us is, none of us can say that we don't have biases, or, some of us say things that, about millennials that we should never, ever, ever say. I use millennials because my children are millennials, and we say, oh, they're lazy. Now imagine if I said that
I
about
hear that quite often. I'm like, how are they lazy? They've evolved. They have
right,
opportunities that we didn't have. That's not
exactly.
laziness.
Right. So you can imagine now you have a millennial going for a job, and then you have a room full of people who are just like, oh no, I don't, they're lazy. Right. And the person doesn't get the job because of their age. That's age discrimination.
Right.
That's discrimination based on age, right? So I'm telling you, millennials, I got your back. because millennials and other generations, they bring in a level of innovation that we
Right.
need. We need
Right.
to open our minds. A lot of times, again, you got baby boomers over 70 and in their 70s, and they're coming into a workplace and they're like, why are you here? You're a dinosaur. Guess what? That's age discrimination. So we've all had those thoughts. We've all had thoughts
Mhm.
about, for me, people would say, I'm too nice. I'm really not that nice. I'm just respectful. And so they're like, oh, well, she wouldn't be a strong leader because she's so nice,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm not cursing everybody out as soon as I walk in the door, or, no, I just have a different way that I show up. So my thing is to help people respect differences, period. And if it is frustrating, it's absolutely, and that's why I have my own consulting business, because I was getting too frustrated too many times in corporate America. And I just felt like I wasn't making real change. And now I can speak freely. If I was still working in corporate America, I would not be able to be on your podcast speaking freely in this way.
Yeah. Yolanda
So,
went through my co-host, she went through the same thing with corporate America and a young minority woman making changes and seeing what really goes on behind the scenes. And she wanted to basically start her own stuff and come out and say she couldn't do it no more. But we live in a society where school is designed to create labor.
mhm.
And you've seen that labor. You mentioned the number of people that are in the workforce, that you might be working with a serial killer, a mail posters, destroying mailman that wants to go out and kill everybody. You never know, but the system is designed to create a labor force. You decided that you wanted to do something different. You got sick and tired of seeing things that wasn't implemented and taken seriously, and started your own company. What were some of the three of the most prolific things that you saw that you said, and that it affected individuals, and you said, I'm tired of this shit, I'm getting ready to go and make a difference?
Wow. The top three. Number one, women being ignored in the workplace, women being set back, the way women are treated in the workplace in general, whether it's how we are treated when we don't have daycare, the way we're ignored or cut off in meetings. So, number one, the treatment of women. And I might as well just throw in the treatment of marginalized people, Black and Brown people. That was really number one. Number two, just the systemic and systematic processes that really kind of stall change in the workplace. So
Mhm.
just say you wanted to do something simple like we talked about, remove something from a job application.
Mhm.
You can be in a workplace and there's so much bureaucracy, so much hierarchy involved that you can't even get a simple thing like a line removed from the application without going through meeting after meeting and approval after approval. So the bureaucracy would be number two. And number three, most workplaces, as you kind of mentioned, they are built for certain things. I work for an organization where I would joke and say they only wanted C players. They only want mediocrity. A lot of organizations, they kind of appease in my opinion, okay, they kind of appease their stakeholders and their shareholders by remaining consistent.
Mhm.
They don't want to be innovative. They want to keep their shareholders happy. And we just saw this with Tesla. Tesla
Yeah.
stock dropped down like 8 points because they're like, Elon Musk is going to take too long. He's doing too much and we don't trust him. And his stock dropped just yesterday, right? Because companies want to know you're going to do things the same way, the same time, at the same time, that you're going to just do it the same. And so it does not. So number three for me is lack of innovation to the level of where I like to be a visionary. I like to do things different. I'm creative. It's not really, I'm going to be honest with y'all from the HR person, there's not a lot of room for creativity in corporate spaces because they want things to stay the same and predictable for their shareholders and their stockholders.
We shared something off camera. I told you about an incident that happened to me going to work for a company. I won't mention the name, and caused my life to change. Just put it like that. And I was really blown away because you got to realize I've always had my own business as a trainer. So staff and stuff is a little bit different. But when I took the role into going into the corporate type setting, I was really dismayed at the fact that even the upper management that I had to report to was unaware of certain laws until the things took place that I shared with you about. What's your take on that? Because I was blown away because they could have told me my rights and so forth, but am I wrong because I had ignorance of the law as it related to corporate, or were they wrong for not doing what they were supposed to do? Does that make any sense? When it comes to like an injury, so I'll just put it out there. When it comes to like getting hurt on the job, what's the correlation between HR and the person who actually got hurt versus management?
Yeah. So I would be almost said I would dare. I would almost dare any employment lawyer or organization to say that it is not the organization's responsibility to make sure employees are aware of their rights. It is absolutely the employer's responsibility, the organization's responsibility to make sure that an employee is aware of their rights. So I'm going to give another little secret that's right in front of your face. Most break rooms have what they call the 5-in-1 posters, which gives a snapshot of all of your rights: workers' compensation rights, family medical leave, overtime pay, which is under FLSA, and it's in these tiny, tiny, tiny little words. When you go in the break room and get your coffee, you know those employment posters, they're there. So that's one step. The employer has to post that by law. But also when you're hired, we were talking about after recruiting, you go into onboarding, you should receive an employee handbook, which will give you all of your rights. Things like everything I mentioned that's on the wall is in that employee handbook. And then when you have an actual incident, the employer, whether it's the HR person or your manager, should always tell you your rights. Hey, employee, well, I know you've been injured. Make sure you call the 1-800 workers comp number, or I know you're taking time off for family medical leave. Here is a cheat sheet with your rights. So when they go to a court of law, and if something happens and you're in front of a judge, the judge, I can almost guarantee, please call me, text me, email me if I am wrong, somebody, please. I want to hear from you. I can guarantee the judge will say, was the employee made aware of their rights? That's going to be question number one or question number two. And the organization will have to say, well, we had the posters, we had an employee handbook. When the person went out, we gave them this letter, we sent them a letter to their home. They have a responsibility under the law to make sure employees are aware of their rights. So I don't know how many times I could say it or how to say it. If you go through your employee handbook, you will see that they will direct you to speak to your direct report or your supervisor if you run into any issue, because that manager needs to be trained to make sure they know how to talk to an employee when they have an incident so they can be made aware of their rights. That's the number one reason why we're training leaders, so that they can answer these questions. And so a manager needs to know this. They need to have supervisor training. They need to know the law, because again, not only is the organization responsible for knowing the law, the leader is responsible for knowing the law. And leaders can be held responsible to the point where they will come after their own personal homes and their own personal things, right? Mm-hmm. So that is the truth, and that is the law. And that's, I don't know how else to say it.
You provided some great... You provided some great information for the listeners, because I hear so many people, especially with the political races going on, and they're talking about people taking jobs from different cultures, and we hear all
Okay.
these different things going on, and it's really good that you came on the show to provide some insight with how human resources work, some validation on at least what individuals can do prior to going for a job. Before we wrap up, you started your own company. Tell the viewers a little bit about your company and what are some of the services that you provide and how they can reach out to you.
Thank you. Well, I hope the viewers found this information necessary and useful. And honestly, that's exactly what my purpose is and why I started my own company. Mrs. HR was how I started it in the beginning. And now my company is called Thela Thatch Consulting. And I have Mrs. HR as some of the products that I offer. So I have Mrs. HR in a box. You can go to mrshrinabox.com. I also wrote a book based on some of my experiences I share called The Diversity Dilemma. You can find that at thediversitydilemma.com or on Amazon. But my company helps small businesses and entrepreneurs that have at least 2 employees, because you have certain laws that you need to comply to when you have 2 or more employees. And I help you just kind of navigate employment laws, how to work with your employees, everything from hire to retire. So benefits, equity. And now I'm so excited to say I help companies with their payroll, making sure we pay people fairly, and also just every single thing. I'm just like a portable HR department. That's what I am. I do everything HR.
Let's talk about, before we wrap up, let's talk about your other venture that you're getting into. You're getting ready to launch, or you've launched your own podcast. Tell me a little bit about that as well.
Thank you so much. So I hope to have the podcast as popular and the caliber as yours, sir. But I just launched, it's airing this coming up this week in the end of October. So not sure when this will air, but it's coming up soon. So it's called the Ask, A-S-K, Ask, and it's going to help us all pronounce Ask Mrs. HR podcast. So it's similar to, just ask me anything. Honestly, again, I was so suppressed in corporate America at times. I couldn't tell you all the answers I wanted to tell you because I couldn't give you the ammunition you might need to sue the organization I work for, right? So now I feel like I can tell you the truth. I'm just going to tell it like it. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to know to help you be successful either in your business or in your workplace. So it's called the Ask Mrs. HR podcast. I'm really excited to just get in front of people and share all of my experience.
That sounds like I want to make sure you guys subscribe, like, share, and follow, and go there and ask Mrs. HR your questions. I don't think no question is off the table for you guys to ask. And the old saying is, knowledge is only good if you're able to share it and you basically use it. Thank you so much, Miss HR, for taking the time to come on the show and sharing such great information. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.